So for myself and Ghost, we're going to be going. Our next game will be Cassell versus Wonderball on Duet.
Ooh, that should be good.
I think, yeah. Well, Wonderball's been playing. I think we saw in his previous game on Pacific, massive eco. Perhaps not the greatest play with his troops, and I'd say I have to favour Cassell on this match though.
Marshall, what do you think before we go?
I'm going to favour Wonderball, simply because I was playing with him earlier in a team game, and he was pretty strong in that. But
Okay.
yeah, Kiesel I also know is very strong, so I think it's going to be quite a close one, and again, I'm reluctant to call it either way.
Well, thank you for dropping by, Marshall, and we will catch up again with you a bit later. But now
Awesome.
we're now going into round 5 of the Big Bang Tournament qualifiers with ExodusEsports.com. We are now looking at Cassell versus Wonderball. And as I was saying, I think I have to favour Cassell for this one. He's just one of the top players of the game.
My money's going to be on Wonderball. Forget you guys. Kiesel can be on as much point as you want, but Wonderball has just gone the distance. The only thing he needs to work on is his micro. We saw that with the match versus Transaction Empire. He's done fantastically economically. If he can bring that in versus Kiesel, a top-tier player, he's going to do fine. The only thing he needs to worry about is...
so far? I think I've been pretty on point with these predictions, right?
Maybe. I don't know. Who are you again? What?
I think... Yeah, I've actually lost track of how well my predictions have been going, so I'm going to say I've got them all right so far.
No,
so
you're going to be wrong this time.
Continuing my 100% rate of guessing, by guessing I obviously mean weighing all the disparate factors carefully.
I mean, I think that's what guessing is, right?
Educated, predictions. Yeah, Cassell, who is kicking off here with bots, transitioning into air being a big factor in Duet, one of these larger maps. The mechs are very spread out. There's not really many concentrations. This map got rebalanced a little while ago, so it used to be all about this raised space here, but these days I think it tends to be the play focus is more around this area here, which is the most concentrated area of mechs.
Definitely. Simply put, there's a lot more metal, and if you're not going for it, your opponent definitely will. I would really like to see that some backyard play, though. Sending maybe 3 or 4 dogs just to raid in this area. I mean, there isn't as much as that center cluster as you mentioned, but it is metal nonetheless. And even if you don't, if you don't have it, then your opponent will. And in a game of numbers, who's got more numbers will win.
Well, we're seeing something that we haven't seen, I think, in all the games we've watched so far. Both players are scouting the other player.
Oh my god!
We are really moving. We're really taking it to the next level here. But I don't like. Well, actually, he's finally got air. My apologies. I thought he'd gone all bot factories, which was an ugly build order. But no, he has got air.
Wonderball forgot that a radar needs to be fully built before you can use it.
Oh, ouch! Yes, and that's just going to it's going to die off. What happened to it? Well, where is the Fabber? Has he grabbed it with his?
I think he accidentally grabbed it when he was just sending out his fabricators to set, and he's going to just straight up rebuild another one if his Q sticks with whatever it's doing.
Well, both players going very bot heavy here. We're going to see a lot of dots coming out. Surprised perhaps to not see a bit more air in the opening build. My experience of doing it is that air really can be a huge factor, much bigger than it can be on other maps, just because everything is so spread out and the travel times between bases are huge, especially as it's quite easy to defend on the ground. And we see Cassell indeed has queued up some walls and a laser turret and a radar over on this entrance.
Now, I do like the idea of going a much heavier air force, but definitely the bots have, at least from my experience, obviously, apparently you have some magical flying air thing that everyone goes air, and I just, few anti-air turrets, and you just kind of kill it all off. Of course, you're starting to build vehicles, but usually I've seen a lot more of a bot heavy in general. Obviously, there's that air support. I would like to see some air fabricators, especially if both players are going to go this air heavy. Actually, forget that idea, excuse me. Some bot fabricators, just because then you can secure a lot of the backward expansion metal much more safely. Now, as you mentioned, this radar and these few walls that Kiesel is setting up in this in the direction, I guess, of this very heavy metal cluster, definitely looks like he's starting to kind of posture towards expanding that direction. Still, I would really, really, really like to see someone grab some of this backyard metal, just because if no one else is getting it, might as well be you, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You've got to go out there and take that medal, and we're seeing already that Casella's taking the more aggressive stance. He's getting his docks out there to control those metal spaces, make sure that Wonderful isn't going out there. Wonderful, on the other hand, going out with the fighter patrols to see what it looks like. Is he trying to get out a cheeky air fabber and just doing that rather easy swing around the equator that you can do and do out and cover pretty much all of the metal? Casella, with these laser tower builds, he really seems to like this build. I've seen him do it several times before, putting up his single laser towers around the back and constructing walls. And considering for Uber League, it just feels so astoundingly lazy and unusual to see just wall and laser tower stuck when it's like, yeah, that's my defense.
Well, at least from what I've seen, maybe not in the higher up leagues, but especially with the kind of multi-opening entrances, usually it's a much safer style. Obviously, one laser turret probably won't be enough to hold off maybe 4 docks. But it buys him enough time that, especially with the mobility of the docks in his base, he can easily use those to just kind of quickly reinforce. So while it might not stop the tide, it will definitely slow it down to a point where he can easily react and counter it, where he won't lose too many units. Now, he is, Kiesel that is, definitely starting to move out towards this heavy metal extractor field, but no fabric. Oh, okay, so he does send the fabricator out, so he's going to start slowly getting control over that. You had mentioned that the anti-air fighters flying around the equator is really strong for the protection over it. Personally, I'm not a real big fan of it, because the thing is, with that, the fabricator, I mean, he might see it, but it's never going to die. He could use his air army to a much greater advantage. I mean, if he clustered up his air units, I think he actually had greater numbers, especially for that air fight that sort of had 2 parts to it. He could have easily cleaned up all those air fighters and those bombers, but instead he had them flying around just seeing if there's an air fabricator. And I think Kiesel sort of double mind gamed him. He knew that there was going to be those air fighters there, so he went something completely different, you know? It was just not the right choice, and then a bad choice, and meh.
Well, I'm not sure it's an idea that you keep them doing the equator, but I think it's a really good way to quickly collect intel of what your opponent is doing. You swing some fighters around the equator, you get an idea of have they expanded, which points they're expanding to, and then you swing them back in, and then you repeat every couple of 2 or 3 minutes, so that you're just keeping on top of that intelligence game, and don't suddenly find that your opponent's managed to slap down a load of walls and turrets and claim the section of the map you're never going to take back. But yeah, by all means, you bring them back into your base afterwards, because it's really easy to concentrate air, and you want to leave just a few air units out and vulnerable. But we see now that Kiesel taking a rather comfortable lead here with his mobile count. He's starting to lock down the spaces. He's making all the aggressive pushes right now, and Wonderwall's taking a very defensive posture with his laser turrets in his base.
See, this was the only problem that I could see Wonderwall having, especially with all the other matches that we did cast of him. He plays a much more passive and relaxed style, and especially against a player such as Kiesel, who has a much more aggressive and very stronger type of gameplay. I mean, it's gonna play right into Kiesel's hand. The only thing that I can see Wonderwall having up on him really is maybe some sort of quick cheese, maybe some sort of fancy orbital play, but really besides that, I mean, if we just kind of start looking around on the planet, I can see all of Orange's base in one shot. If you try and get all of Kiesel's base in one shot, you really can't, just because he's so spread out. There's just so much control that he has. I mean, economically he's ahead. Energy, whatever, you know, he needs energy. Unit composition wise, he's ahead. There's a lot of factors that Kiesel already has just because he's playing this such aggressive style, and Wonderwall needs to kind of either man up to it and try and just fight aggressive versus aggressive, or he needs to find something super cheesy that he can use to take to his advantage.
Well, it feels unfortunate that he's already sort of letting the game slip away from him, because by allowing him to be contained in his base, Duat is very much about the mechs all outside the base. You've got to get out there. You've got to contest the spaces. You can't, because Cell is claiming almost everything around the planet now, and he's got troops everywhere. So even where he doesn't own the metal yet, it's not in a position for Wonderwall to come out and get it. And we're seeing numerous fabbers sitting in Wonderwall's base right now, unable to leave because there's troops lurking just on the other side of these crevasses, and he's looking in real trouble already.
I think as long as Kiesel can hold this, I mean, simply put, he can literally choke Wonderwall to death. I mean, there's nothing. He has some economy, but I mean, I think Wonderwall's so stressed right now, he doesn't even realize he's missing a metal extractor. He can use some of these fabricators to start reclaiming some of this metal, and I think the only way, if he really wants to get out of this this chokehold, is just to go for one spot, go all in on it, and just break that one side. I mean, obviously he can't try and take 3 fights at once, he just doesn't have the economy. I mean, Kiesel's up, 3 times his economy already, but Wonderwall just can't answer like that. He needs to decide, okay, I'm going to go this route, turtle up the other sides, forget him, I'm going this way. And the problem he has right now is, well, he just doesn't seem to really have that. He doesn't seem to be thinking in that way. He seems to be just trying to defend everything at once, and just Kiesel's playing to that advantage.
Yeah, well, he's taking a very, as you say, he's a very passive player. He's taking a passive stance. He's building up these turrets now to hold the line. But really, I mean, even in his turret positioning is really very defensive. He's built them too far back, so he's having to build 2 turrets, and they can't support each other. Rather, if he built them further forward, they could both fire together, doubling their effectiveness. But really, Kiesel's he knows how you play, right? You get out there and you've got to get your troops rallied out around the planet to own these spaces. And Wonderball did the sort of traditional, I'm going to rally my troops inside my base and then occasionally I'll roll out. And by that point, Kiesel was everywhere. And that he's used that economy lead to give him the advantage in terms of troops so that Wonderball can't counter him. And indeed, we see that there's a orbital radar going up from Kiesel, so he's clearly watching out for some cheesy strats happening.
Well, he feels it. He knows, once your opponent's contained, there's only one direction to go, up. And simply put, Wonderball just doesn't have the economy to support that. I mean, Kiesel getting tier 2 just because he's floating. I think if that's the only thing I'm going to critique him on, he's floating quite hard. I mean, for a player of his caliber, build some factories, get a teleporter out, and just start throwing your economy at him. Start flexing that muscle he has. He knows that he's in a very commanding position, and just start throwing things at him. I mean, the worst that could happen is Wonderball breaks out in one direction, then, oh no, I guess I'll just throw 400 more tanks at you. What are you gonna do? There's not much that Wonderball has to use, and Kiesel should just really use that kind of Zergling mentality, just swarm him. There's nothing else he has.
Well, I think there's anything we've learned from Klops is that you don't necessarily need to be any good at handling your economy as long as you can handle your troops well enough.
Definitely.
I think Kiesel is clearly going from the Klopp school of economy management. He's managed to balance it out now. He's using that well. He's got his air domination. You see him, he swung into Wonderball's base there almost with impunity and just took out whatever he felt like. And these turrets aren't going to be much good because if he wants to and he's going to attack a particular route, he's just going to go in there and bomb them. But you see he's just containing Wonderball. He's taking no risks here. That's why he's getting the auto raid up, because he didn't have very good... he's building up a teleporter as well to bring his troops forward faster, I guess. So I think we know what side the push is going to be on.
I'm actually kind of surprised here. I wonder if this is just because Wonderball's been doing so well in the standings that Kiesel's playing this very aggressive, secure, and then kill kind of style. I mean, I think if this was maybe more of the first 1 or 2 matches, we might see a much more aggressive, more in-your-face kind of Kiesel. But I mean, just because of Wonderball's standings, I mean, I think he's currently 3-1. Trying to look through the standings real quick here. No, he's 4-0 against a 3-0 Kiesel. So, Kiesel's a fantastic, great guy, smart person. He knows. I mean, if a player's having a really good day, they are on point. Everything is just firing and firing and firing. So I think this is him just trying to figure out what's going on. Why is Wonderball doing so good, and why is he at a 4-0 against my 3-0? What's happening? And this is definitely a very aggressive but smart Kiesel move.
Well, he's had Wonderball so contained, and he can see that Wonderball's building up defences, and Duat's a map that's very easy to defend. You can actually lose yourself. I think in the past I've lost games where I've had control of the map, I've been building up outside a base, and then you slip up, your opponent sneaks out from one of the other entrances and comes and crushes you, because it can be so hard to push into their base if they wall up just right. I think he's not taking any chances here. He's getting the teleporter up. He's bringing he wants to bring his tier 2 to the front lines as fast as possible, and then we're going to see him coming for the killing blow very soon, I think. And we see Grenadiers.
I like this pelter though. this one pelter. It's going to take a couple minutes, but he's going to do it. It's going to go the distance and kill off every single flame tank here.
Yeah, these the Infernos are withdrawing. Your dream is over.
Oh no! Go! Oh, there it is. There it is. The floodgates have opened. It is time to see the death of an orange commander.
Here we go. Here comes the attack. It's gonna be. It's not gonna be pretty. Well, it's gonna be very pretty, but it's not gonna be good for Wonderball.
I was gonna say you might not have the mods running, but I've got pew pew. I've got all the sparkles. I mean, it's a rave on my side of the screen here. It is absolutely colorful. The units though of Kiesel, I mean, just overwhelming Wonderball here. These I like this placement though of the Grenadiers, placing them specifically behind that mountain face so they couldn't die off, and then just using their range to just lob over just fiery rounds of death and destruction. These flame tanks, actually in the back, kind of oddly enough, they should have been more towards the front to try and buy the tanks that they were supposed to be protecting more time, but at this point, well, It's kind
Wonderful making some
of
poor micro decisions as well. He's trying to micro his whole force as one, but it's mainly Infernos, and they really just need to be pushing into Kiesel's force. I think at this point, Kisel has it won, but really, yeah, he needs to get those Infernos and drive into the heart of that army, because that's otherwise, you know, why do you have Infernos? And probably not the best choice for defending your base.
Vanguard versus Inferno, though. You want to know a really sad vision? That's kind of that one hurt. Flame Tank just trying to cook the Vanguard, but Vanguard just no. Let me show you how it's done, kid. But explosions from an Orange Commander, sort of seen coming.
Yeah, we see the last sight there of the commander, just a huge army swarming his base, and I have to say that was a pretty one-sided game. Wonderball taking on a very defensive posture that really didn't work out for him on this map.
Definitely. I mean, I would say the only flaw to that game was the person playing the commander here. The decision to play so defensive and so passive, I mean, played exactly into how Kiesel, a much more aggressive and stronger player, likes to play. He really likes to go for that early aggression, that just get out there, get in your face, and really remind you who you're playing against. And Wonderworld took to that. I mean, he was scared, I would say, for the entire game, really. Really concerned about that, especially if he wants to try and get into something else against maybe another Kiesel match, but we'll see how he does.
Well, yeah, I mean, we see, like, you know, what is it, about 5 minutes here, that Wonderwall's holding his own in eco, because it's the point where they're still expanding within their own bases. Both players very equal, but even at that point, Kisel's already got troops all the way around outside Wonderwall's base. He's keeping an eye on things, he's seeing where's Wonderwall expanding so he can focus his forces. And Wonderwall isn't leaving his base, he's trying to drive off these troops. He's already going into defensive mode, building up some laser turrets around his entrances, and he's not making the moves necessary to get out there and take that territory. And we're seeing the long game, as we saw with that crushing force that came with Tier 2 at 15 minutes, it didn't work out for him at all. He needed to get out there and contest that territory. And perhaps even as a naturally cautious player, I suspect that facing off a player against Kisel's caliber can be quite intimidating. And I know some players will go more defensive if they're concerned about their opponent.
Definitely. Just a name alone can scare a player, and we saw that. We definitely saw that.
Well, indeed, it can often cost you the game doing that as well, because you need to get out there and get in their face. PA is not a game of defensiveness. It's quite an aggressive game, really. You need to go out there, claim that territory, because most of the economy that you're going to need to win the game is not in your base. So you've got to get out there, you've got to contest it. If you leave it for your opponent, then they're going to steamroll you no matter how poorly they play. And I think we've seen in some of the other games that we've watched that an economy, indeed, Wonder will have that in one of his earlier games. He didn't handle his troops as well, but he had a better economy, and in the end, he could utilize that advantage to win the game. And we saw the same with Kisel here.
Okay, so this is just to kind of help me prove my point. Going back to about 5 minutes 40 seconds here, the whole patrolling around the units just to kind of get the vision and the map awareness. Sending the 4, I counted it up. It was I believe 11 of Wonderbolt's anti-air fighters, or the Hummingbirds, versus the 3, 6, 9 of Kiesel's Hummingbirds. So numerically he should have won. The problem was they came in and they traded 4 versus 9, and then suddenly I think it was like 5 versus like 7.
I would say the problem was not that he had them spread out, it was that he engaged at all. His fighters had no business getting involved in that fight. They should have been on a movement order to take him around the centre and gather intelligence, because that's what you're sending them out for. There's no point fighting with just part of your air force. You grab the rest. If you want to do a fight, you get the rest of your air force and you bring them all together.
Right.
If you're not going to fight, what you should have just done is you should have been scouting, should have just carried on moving around the equator, and Kisel's air force would have been left behind. It wouldn't have mattered. And indeed, if he hadn't engaged, his 4 fighters would have only been engaging against 2 of the fighters on the outskirts, and he might have been able to take them out and actually come away with an advantage there. But
well, then maybe I want to rephrase it. Maybe just having like 1 or 2 instead of 4, or I
think 1's often too few, because if it runs into anything or it gets an unlucky shot off, then it gets taken out. You have a couple, and then you can just fly around and. But unfortunately, Wonderwood didn't use that intelligence to do anything. He didn't move his troops out to contest any of those areas, so while he was getting the intel, he didn't really make use of it.
Alright, well, Kiesel, I mean, that was just it was a landslide. I don't know how else to phrase it. Just aggressive play in general, controlling every single aspect of the game. His general just general map awareness was just everywhere, and definitely his micro showing through, especially on a map like this where you've got 4 or 5 different control groups of just 6 or 7 docks, where each one is controlling like this part here, that part there, and then everything coming together at once. I mean, the strings were just attached to everything, and Kiesel just knew how to pull them right.
Yeah, well, no, we look at the command rate and we can see that really, Casella's APM and the APM needed to maintain all those different fronts that he was fighting on, keeping his troops coming in from every direction. And even from about the 5-minute mark, the difference in units was just sort of growing hugely at that point. I have to say, it felt like a very one-sided game. I think even though Wonderbull actually did quite well in keeping up in terms of factories, his economy was struggling the whole time, which caused him to fall so far behind. He did all right until about the halfway point, say 5 or 6 minutes, and at that point he ran out of mechs, he ran out of metal points in his base. It became about claiming the rest of the map, and Cassell was just all over it.
Very much so. He had that one avenue though at around the 7:45 minute mark ish, where he had those units just kind of chilling on what's the correct. Oh, he's on the north. He's like at the very north
what time
pole.
was that? 7:51, did you say?
7:45. Well, you can go 7:50. He had some of the units moving out, and he was actually pressuring. He had an avenue to expand. I mean, it didn't seem like he was really intent, or maybe he was just kind of thinking about other things. But he had those like 5 fabricators chilling in that that just army rally spot, where he could have really sent those out, get some radar, and then just try and guarantee some metal for him, because at that point it was already 180 versus 82, and
I think he was intimidated because he'd run into this wall that Kisela had built up earlier, and he'd lost an army out there, and I think it put him again. It just put him on the defensive because he's like, there's a wall out there and I can't fight for it. But there's no reason he needs to engage at that point anyway. As you say, he could go out with these fabrics, he could use those docks to clear a path out the side, start taking other metal, or even get a or use the docks as cover to get a pelter up and take out troops behind the wall, and then push past it.
Right. Well, I think just perfectly explained is that 850 mark where that metal extractor. I mean, that's just sloppy, really.